We open to Seven in the mess hall, trying to make small talk with Kim and B'Elanna. It goes terribly, but don't worry about it, because it's just a simulation. The doc is trying to give her some pointers on how to interact with the normals, but she's had her fill and leaves for her weekly medical maintenance instead. Let's try the bridge and see if they're having better luck. We found some magenta fog, and Kim says it's got a few things in we don't quite recognise. It's also bigger than our sensors can detect, so going round it isn't really an option. Guess we'll go through it then. Janeway orders Voyager to move towards it, though relatively slowly, just in case. That might have been a good call, as Kim starts experiencing pain. Paris and Tuvok follow suit, while Kim develops the top of a cheese and tomato pizza on his hand. Janeway and Chakotay start hurting too, and she tells Paris to about face so we can scarp her. He doesn't quite make it, and Janeway calls the doc for assistance. The doc's a bit busy though. Shit's kicked off all over the ship, and he has his hands full, so he sends Seven up there with a gizmo to treat burns. Whatever's going on, Seven seems unaffected. Back on the bridge, Tuvok manages to get to the controls, despite his pain. He pulls a U-turn and we skedaddle from the magenta fog, causing Kim to feel a little better. The same can't be said of the guy Seven finds on the floor in front of the turbolift when she arrives. She declares him snuffed it and doesn't offer to bring him back like she did for Neelix. Maybe she doesn't want to risk causing another existential crisis, or maybe he was just an asshole. Time to see how deep the shit we're in is. Astrometrics gives us more details on how big that magenta fog is, and the results are far from promising. A month to go through and a year to go round. A few minutes in it was enough to cook that guy's face, so a month is out of the question for the crew. No poxy pink cloud is going to stop Janeway though, and she goes to ask the doc what we can do about it. In short, bugger all, there's some super serious radiation in there, and if they were exposed to it, they'd all get very dead indeed. Which is why he's suggesting they all go into stasis. They can sleep for a month while he flies the ship through the fog for them. Janeway's a touch worried by the idea. He'd not just be flying the ship, but keeping it running and watching over the crew, and we don't know if his program will remain unaffected by that radiation or whatever else is in there. He'll need a hand. The only option for that is Seven. She's the one biological on the ship that wasn't affected when everybody else was doing the ouchie fandango. Janeway's concerned that this might be too much for her, though interestingly not because of her competence. She references Seven's struggle to adapt when she joined Voyager. Going from constant contact with a ship of 100,000 or so to verbal communication with about 150 was quite the shock. If we do this, she'll only have the Doctor for company, and Janeway's concerned about how that'll affect her. Seven believes she'll adapt and convinces Janeway. She bristles a little when learning that the Doc will be in charge, but he has the greater knowledge of Starfleet rules, and she reluctantly agrees. Janeway's letting the senior staff know what's going to happen. People are a bit jittery, but she gets on top of it and things settle down. Stasis isn't new, and crews have gone far longer than us, so we should be fine. Janeway dismisses everyone, but Chakotay stays. He wants some reassurance that this is the right call, not the stasis stuff, but her choice of caretaker. Seven is still a source of concern for him, a variable he isn't confident he can reliably predict, and the thought of her in charge is not comforting. Janeway can't give him absolute reasons for believing she's right, relying on her feelings. To be fair, if Seven wanted everybody dead, she's had plenty of time and ways to make it happen, so this feels like a solid enough call to me. Chakotay lets it go and prepares to take a nap. Perhaps he's realised that if Janeway's wrong, he won't be around to know about it. We're sticking everybody on the same deck, specifically 14, so that it's easier for the Doc to monitor them all. Paris has some reservations and receives a little mockery from Kim. Janeway mentions a safety switch inside to open it if he wakes up early, but if he does, he's going to get cooked by radiation anyway. Still, he seems not to realise this and is comforted all the same. Janeway's turn, and before she beds down, she reiterates her confidence in the Doc and Seven to take care of things while she's napping. The chamber closes and we zoom out to a multi-level storage facility, the height of which I can't seem to account for on the ship's schematics, but let's ignore that for now. Day 10 of our journey, and Seven is going about her daily routine. A little drink, a little check of engineering in the bridge, a little finding Paris out of his chamber and unconscious on the floor. She wastes a perfectly good opportunity at plausible deniability by calling the Doctor and requesting his help. Back in the pod he goes, as the Doc tells us people coming out of stasis abruptly is not unheard of, and if anybody was going to be a dick about this, it would naturally be Paris. Seven questions why he's complaining, either not getting or choosing not to get the joke, and it's our first hint at friction between them. The first for us, but apparently not the first for the Doctor. He notes she's been increasingly irritable, an accusation she returns for him, and he orders some therapy on the holodeck. Things must be dire if he thinks the presence of Neelix can improve them, unless it's that simulation Tuvok made of strangling him anyway. There's a party, and all of the crew are there in holographic form. As an aside, I note the Doc's still wearing his mobile emitter. Perhaps it was easier to keep it on than transfer his program to the holodeck. Neelix is trying to be a good host and notes Seven isn't taking part, instead pissing about on a tablet. He invites her to join the party, an offer she declines, but she sees an opportunity, asking him about warp field gubbins. Janeway's invited over too, and the group have an animated little chat. The Doc sees this, and rather than noticing she's managed to do that whole socializing thing she was struggling with earlier, pauses the program and scolds her for mixing it with work. That feels like a bit of a dick move to me. Okay, she might have been doing it to prove a point, but stopping her when she'd achieved interaction is sending a mixed message. There's a bit of a kerfuffle between them, the sort of thing that in a sitcom would result in them painting a line down the middle of the ship and keeping to their own sides. The computer gets tired of their squabbling and, after a bit of a shake, reports a problem with the antimatter storage tanks. Shit's real bad, and if we don't spit the tanks out, it'll get significantly worse. They'll need to work together to fix things, so the Doc goes to the bridge while Seven hits engineering. From the bridge, the Doc tells Seven that things in engineering are proper fucked, with fire everywhere and such like. He reports explosion after explosion, none of which correspond with the ship shaking, I note. Seven arrives at engineering to find it's perfectly fine, and the whole thing was a false alarm. Is somebody dicking us around? The answer is no. We track down the problem, and rather delightfully, it's one that both makes perfect sense and I hadn't considered. Voyager uses bioneural gel packs for some of its computer stuff, basically upgrades from the silicon bobbins of previous ships. But those packs have a biological component, as implied by the name, and that component is suffering from the radiation that was causing problems for the crew. They replace a damaged pack, and the Doc wants to take it to sickbay for diagnosis, until something even more serious makes itself known. His program is starting to glitch, and if it goes down while he's in the mobile emitter, it risks being permanent. We run to the sickbay, which would probably be a lot easier without those heels, and make it inside. The Doc takes off the emitter and hands it to Seven, without transferring his program, I note, and some checks reveal that it's a bit buggered. The Doc can't risk using it again until it's fixed and we're out of the magenta fog, or the corruption might happen again. That means he's stuck in sickbay, and everything else will have to be done by Seven. Seven's alone on an icy tundra. Not really, of course, it's just a dream to represent her growing isolation. We're on day 29 in the magenta fog, and Seven has sufficient skill at introspection to realise this experience is starting to affect her, saying as much in her personal log. Perhaps it's a good thing, then, that Voyager's keeping her busy. With the Doc confined to sickbay and the radiation slowly damaging the ship's systems, she's got her hands full. And it's only going to get worse. When trying to correct course on the bridge, Voyager's computer goes to shit and she has to do it manually. Seven starts a diagnostic and manages to get things back under control, but we learn that a third of the gel packs are now shagged, so the solution is temporary at best. We nip to astrometrics to see how much longer this is going to take. By current estimates, we'll be through in about 6 days, so we just have to keep things running till then. Seven leaves, and as she's walking along a corridor, hears Paris calling for help. Which is odd, as, upon checking, we see he's still in his pod. No time for considering that, though, as the computer tells her there's a ship approaching and has hailed us. Given what just happened, I'd maybe run that past the Doctor, but Seven thinks she's got this. She responds, and we're told the ship is just another traveller who's looking to trade on their way through the magenta fog. Sounds entirely above board, and Seven invites him over. We teleport him aboard, and despite how late we are in the episode, let's drag out the Wheel of Names. Our guest's new name is... Angus Mac MacGuffin by Ensign Azian. After introductions, Angus Mac MacGuffin says he's never heard of the Borg. Lucky him. Mac also says he wants to be the first of his kind to get through the fog, which is why he's on this little jaunt. He's immune to the effects of the fog, but not the loneliness, and asks if Seven has been feeling the same. After all, it can't be easy for a former drone. What an odd thing to say for someone who's never heard of the Borg, and Seven picks up on the error. She thinks it's time for Angus Mac MacGuffin to leave, and escorts him out. On the way, she hears Paris again and looks around, only to discover that Mac has disappeared when she turns back. What an odd thing for someone who's absolutely, completely real to do. A little running later, and Seven sees some legs disappear around a corner. Maybe Mac just wanted to get in a little cardio. Seven gives the doc a call to tell him there's an intruder before going after Mac, who, I must repeat, definitely exists. How curious. The Doctor can't detect Angus MacMacGuffin or his ship on sensors. Clearly he's got some sort of cloaking technology, so Seven needs to get a really big gun and hunt the bastard down. Oh, and maybe we'll do some of the maintenance that keeps Voyager running if we've got time too. She grabs a rifle and starts roaming the ship. Noises and whispers accompany her on her rounds, but she manages to make it to the stasis pods and perform some basic checks. All looks good, so let's move on. As she walks down a corridor, Angus MacMacGuffin calls her over the ship's intercom. He teases and cajoles, trying to provoke a response, and asks what would happen if he dicked around with the warp core. Seven runs to engineering and finds it empty. Mac calls again and Seven asks where he is. On the bridge, he says, where he can do anything he wants. Dealing with Mac will have to wait. Seven sees Paris and Kim on the upper level of engineering and begging for help. She rushes to assist, but not before they burst into flames and then disappear. Clearly that radiation was worse than we thought. Oh well, can't be helped. Let's deal with Angus MacMacGuffin instead. Seven keeps him busy talking while she plays with a computer console. What's she doing? Why, she's removing all the oxygen from the bridge while locking the doors, and has the pleasure of listening to the bastard suffocate. If Mac was real, that would have been a pretty smart move. Seven calls the dog to let him know that she's, in her words, incapacitated the intruder. Apparently, the doc's fixed his mobile emitter and is on his way to her with news about those gel packs. Calling it now, the doc went offline a week ago and she's imagining him too. Seven returns to the lower level of engineering to wait for the doc. There's an arrival, but not the one she expected. Angus MacMacGuffin isn't quite as incapacitated as she thought, and he's come to say hi. Pooping some yellow at him does bugger all, and he starts a speech about how she's weak and a failure as a human. She's Borg, and stripping her from the collective has turned her into nothing. The doc arrives to find Seven pointing a gun at empty space. Taking the gun from her, he explains that those gel packs broke down because the radiation affects neural connections. That's why she's been experiencing hallucinations. Let's get her to sickbay for some delicious brain drugs. Cue an exploding console and the doc flickering a bit. He says he tied the mobile emitter into the ship, which, well, it's not something we've seen before, but it doesn't outright prove that he's not real. She's struggling now, her confidence shot, and the doc tells Seven that she has to hang on for a little bit longer. His disappearance causes panic in Seven, now with no choice but to face solitude. Tangentially, the doc's mobile emitter didn't fall to the floor and is nowhere to be seen. Again, it's not definitive proof that he's imaginary, as the same thing happened in Message in a Bottle, but it's certainly suspicious. Seven's back in astrometrics. Checking how long she has left, the computer tells her she'll be out of the magenta fog in 17 hours. That's far too long, says the imaginary Kim standing next to her, whose entire face now looks like melted cheese. She tells him to get fucked, as the computer informs us that propulsion systems are going down. They're kind of important, so we'd best go and fix them. The corridor on the way provides some green fog and a hallucination Borg. A bit of running away doesn't help, so she ignores him instead, all while being told that she's weak now that she's an individual. She makes it to the safety of a turbo lift and leaves hallucination Borg behind. No need to fear solitude, though, as our old mate Angus MacMacGuffin is back. Some more insults and a temptation to surrender by embracing the hallucinations are ignored, and she reaches the bridge. She's not alone here either, and they're all saying she'll fail too. Tangentially, well done to the effects department for remembering Vulcans have green blood. Diverting all the power we've got left to engines doesn't solve the problem, but imaginary Janeway tells her there is a solution. See, we do have more power. It's in the stasis chambers. Diverting the juice from those would get us running again. We wouldn't need to kill all of them, just some. Seven cuts power to the first 10 chambers, and the imaginary bridge crew all celebrate the fact that those people will die. Seven's already leaving, though, on her way to the stasis units. When she arrives, imaginary Janeway is already there to gloat. Paris is choking in his stasis chamber, and imaginary Janeway asks Seven what she's going to do about it. The answer is cut life support to all decks. The power saved is diverted to the stasis units to save them, and she falls unconscious shortly after. I guess we could ask why she didn't use that for propulsion to begin with and just get in an environment suit, but I think it's fair to say that she had other things on her mind. She awakes to find Janeway, Chakotay, and the Doctor over her. Chakotay tells her that the doc came back online after leaving the nebula and found her, turning life support back on and treating her. Janeway and Chakotay leave her to rest while the doc expresses his pride in her. Later, in the mess hall, Neelix is serving the crew with all of those fruits and vegetables that would have been burned by the radiation, but let's ignore that for now. Seven arrives and asks to join them, the need for company after a month alone apparent, and they start chatting as we fly away. Right, first things first, I take issue with that nebula. Buckle up, cause this one gets a bit number heavy. We're told it'll take a month to go through and a year to go round. Alright then, let's examine that. From the external shots we see, they're going through the nebula at impulse speed, not warp. According to the Voyager technical manual, full impulse speed for Voyager is 1/4 of the speed of light. If it's taking a month to go through it at that speed, we cover around 0.02 of a light year. By contrast, let's calculate a year at warp 6, and before you get in on the comments, yes, I know we can do 9.975, but I'm being generous and assuming a comfortable cruising speed. Warp 6 is 392.5 times the speed of light, so in 1 year at warp 6, we cover 392.5 light years. Given that data, the graphical representation we're shown of the nebula is, to put it mildly, a touch inaccurate. To give you an idea of how inaccurate, if the nebula was a skyscraper, it would be as tall as the Empire State Building and equally as wide, but with the thickness of a piece of paper. I'd argue such a nebula forming naturally is a bit unlikely. In fact, the only way I can reasonably account for this is that Q is fucking with them. Now that's out of my system, let's take a look at the actual episode. Given that I've already had a massive technical rant, let's gloss over the questionable usefulness of those stasis pods in preventing radiation damage. Instead, we'll focus on Seven, and that comes in two flavours. The first is negative, her reaction to being told the Doctor will be in charge. "Follow the orders of a hologram," she responds with incredulity. This ties into what I said in the last video about the Doctor being seen as lesser by some, though I'm a little surprised to see it coming from her. That's not just because she's Voyager's other outsider, but also because the concept of one form of consciousness being lesser because it isn't attached to meat is entirely illogical. The rest is entirely positive, of course, potentially sacrificing herself to save 10 of the crew, even in the full knowledge that one of them was Tom Paris. We also explore her struggle with individuality and facing the fears that this change has inherently weakened her. Such examination helps to provide some vulnerability to a character usually written as aloof and impenetrable. On top of that, the episode is a decent indicator of her attitudes towards socialization. This is something we've touched on before, the desire to be part of the group mixed with the frustration at not understanding why people create all of these superfluous hoops to jump through. All of this goes a fair way to making her more relatable as a character. Before we finish, we'll cover that prediction I made of the Doc being imaginary. Ultimately, we don't find out one way or the other, and I think I prefer keeping it that way, but there are a few circumstantial things to support it. Personally, I choose to believe that he was a hallucination, as I think it's more satisfying as a story element if he was. While all the others on Voyager have shown misgivings towards her to a lesser or greater degree, the Doctor has always been the one to try and help her adapt. Seven manifesting him as her mind trying to fight back is, to me at least, a pleasing consequence of that interaction. End of episode.
Hello, it's Space Dog again. Hey, it's been a funny few days. I'm still trying to adapt to life as a cartoon. There's something a bit disconcerting about your shit looking like an emoji. Mustn't grumble though. It's been loads better than being stuck inside the teleporter thingy like computer, and everybody's been loads nicer to me now 'cause I'm cute. Well, except that guy whose face I melted, but he were a dick anyway. Woof.